want to get into comics, let's talk about it. Hi, hello, if it's your first time here, I'm Stella. I do cosplay and pop culture media stuff, and I actually really like comics and superhero things and anime and all that stuff. But I've been getting asked more and more about how to get into comics because that is a very, very, very slippery, scary slope, and I understand that because I've been there. I am going to preface this with I will be talking about Marvel specifically. That does not mean that DC is excluded. It's just that's how I got into comics and that's my experience, so that's what I'm going to relay. But theoretically, it also works the other way too. So my personal journey in comics, my dad grew up reading comics. He really loved them. I watched a couple of the Marvel movies in high school. Avengers came out in my senior year of high school, and I was obsessed with it, as most people my age were at the time. Loki was everything to me. Loki is still everything to me. And then I kind of fell off of it for a while. I watched a couple movies with my dad. They usually came out around his birthday, so we made a thing of it. Eventually, Thor Ragnarok came out, and that dragged me fully back into being a huge Marvel fan. So that is like this is when I started reading. I started reading comics in 2017, and I didn't really know how to go about it correctly, but the way I did it is that I chose a character, which was Loki. And Loki is very fortunate where they got rebooted at one point, so they had all of their old like 90s and before 90s comic lore, but then they got a really solid like reboot of the story, and that was a really good place to start. And with that, you can, if you were going to choose Loki, you could do Journey into Mystery. I skipped that in my first one and I went straight to Agent of Asgard, and that was like my first comic experience reading a comic with Loki, and I could very easily jump from that to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and it actually filled out a very important like arc in Marvel Comics, which was War of the Realms, so I got to follow that. But the really cool thing with Loki is that I also got to meet and kind of get the gist of like nearly every Marvel character, because Loki is always up against someone, and it's not always Thor, it's not always the Asgardians. Reading through Loki, I've met, Doctor Strange, Iron Fist, Miss Marvel, a bunch of people that you just kind of go through in passing because they're always up against or working with another Marvel character. Met the Fantastic Four that way. So like it's one of the ways that I just kind of pinpointed where I wanted to start, which involves doing a little bit of research before you start out. Really got into Thor Ragnarok. I chose where to start, which I just decided not to do Journey into Mystery. I eventually read it later, but I was okay enough in the like they do like little blurbs and stuff too, so like it definitely does help. It was easier to just start where they were like fully rebooted, which is Agent of Asgard in my opinion, and keep continuing through there. So from that moment in 2017 when I started reading comics, I have continued reading whatever Loki is in, and it has kept me reading comics since then. There's also, Marvel does cool things like novels. Neither of them are like MCU based, it's very much comic based, and if you like reading like books, that's also a thing that could get you into it, and it does have a lot of the like magic lore and stuff that the comics have, but it's not MCU nor comic based, it's just kind of taken from the comics. The chaotic, neutral kind of comic thing, and go to a comic store. If you have one, you're lucky enough to have one near you and they could recommend you. They do sometimes have like character sets that are just, these are the comics that go for this character. This is what, I don't think you can see it because it's in frame, but I have like the Loki Bible, if you will. I have the big like Loki God of Stories book, and that has everything that you kind of like need to know about Loki in there. That one's big and it is an investment obviously, but that is like they have also the shorter, like, just this is War of the Realms, this is this specific thing. So you can get chunks of a character's story that way, which is really cool. But I definitely recommend choosing a character, following that character through. I like Daredevil, I'm gonna do that. Okay, read Born Again, read Devil's Reign, or I like, Doctor Strange, okay? Death of Doctor Strange 2015 is pretty good. That's, I would say, modern Doctor Strange, not like previous Doctor Strange. Modern Doctor Strange, starting at Doctor Strange 2015 is a very good place to start, because a lot of modern Marvel things that are like sprinkling in comics is taking from Doctor Strange 2015. Personally, it's one of my favorites. I'm not just saying that, but it is one of my favorite Doctor Strange ones. But then you get Doctor Strange, you get Death of Doctor Strange, and then you will get, because it's coming up, the Sorcerer Supreme of Asgard comic. Do you like Wanda? You can read, House of M, but you can also read Young Avengers. If you don't know where to start with Wanda, you get her sons mostly telling the story of like meeting Wanda. Witch's Road is a good Scarlet Witch one though, if you want Scarlet Witch. Without like all of the scariness of jumping into a comic, that one's a pretty good standalone intro to Wanda. Speaking strictly on Marvel, so that's just my experience again. Marvel has been doing some fun stuff, like there's currently a TVA comic going on. It is MCU based, but there are actually some comic elements. Gwen Stacy is from the comics, so you do get some little comic things sprinkled in. And they do things called What If, which also help a lot because they're completely separate situations from the comics, but they have the comic characters in it. So if you just wanted to get used to reading comics, I would definitely pick up like What If issues because they're one, fun, and two, kind of teach you stuff without being so densely immersed in the world of comics. And the cool thing about comics, this is not sponsored, but hey, Marvel, if you ever want to, both DC and Marvel both have online or like comic apps which have a lot, if not all, of their comics in there. So it's like a subscription, so it's a little bit cheaper than getting the paper ones, and you can read and jump around wherever you want. But they also have, for the most part, at least Marvel does, like a reading list for, you know, Fantastic Four is coming out soon, so it has like, if you want to learn about the Fantastic Four, here's a handful of comics to read, and it's not the whole run, but it's like jumping around really fast. What I've also done over time is that I have picked up a handful of classic ones. I don't know if you can tell because of the shine, but I've picked up a handful of classic comics over the years. This one I picked up to read because of Brad Wolfe being in the Loki series, and I wanted to learn about the characters, so I actually happened to find this at a comic store near me, and it was in their like discount bin because it's so old. But I now have a copy of the 𝙻𝙸𝙺𝚃 thing, which is what Brad Wolfe is based off of, which was really neat. And so while I don't always buy every single, I usually end up just picking up whatever cover I think is pretty. So like this one is one of my favorites, and I really just want to frame them and put them on my wall, so I might do that one day. But yeah, this is a very short and sweet video, but I have been getting asked about it, so I thought maybe I would give my 2 cents, throw my hat in the ring, and I hope that it helps because I know getting into comics is a really daunting task, and I hope this helps so you can enjoy reading comics with me. Alrighty guys, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!